Welcome to the pre-show, everyone. Here I am typing away, and there you are looking over my shoulder. If you are joining us live, welcome. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes, and you'll be ready to go. You'll certainly see, and if you are watching this on the replay, usually about a day after, you'll see that the YouTube description will have timestamps of exactly when we start this thing. So you'll be in good shape for that. I think we were in pretty good shape here. I've gotten quite a few things ready while you've been away, while you've been wondering what's been going on. All right, those look good. Let's do a quick, I already did the camera check. We don't even have to do that. I'm just here talking to the chat room. If you are watching this on YouTube and it's live, then you can pop over to my website where there is a live chat at professormesser.com/live. And you'll be able to look through that as well. We'll need to by the way, today's Network Plus, for those of you that are joining us and are wondering what in the world is going on. It's all Network Plus today. We'll do an hour of Q&A at the beginning, and then we'll open up the phone lines, take questions from the chat room, and just kind of hang out. It's the after show is that second hour where there is no agenda. There's no particular itinerary of things. There's no particular list that we need to get through. It could last 5 minutes. It could last 5 hours. Okay, it won't last 5 hours, but you know what I'm saying. There's no particular time that I set for that particular event. I try not to make it go over an hour because just how much of this can anyone take at one time, including myself. Let's see if we can get this mic in the right place. I think we're pretty good there. This is, let's do a quick check. That's not the picture I want. That's me. Hi. That's not helpful at all. That's the picture I was looking for. That looks good. I've not done a color check with this yet, but that's okay. That's all right. For the live, it's kind of hard. You can't do any color correction on live because it's too late. And I don't edit this and then put it back out. So whatever we record right now, generally speaking, is what is saved on the YouTube. So that's one of those situations where we'll just see how it turns out. We've got a few minutes to go, 8 minutes, less than actually, 7 minutes and 10 seconds before we get started. So get yourself a beverage, get something to snack on, get your apps ready to go, your Socrative app. You'll find instructions on how to follow along with the Q&A at professormesser.com/live. Got a little piece there. Hello, David. Congratulations on your A+. Oh, working on Network Plus now. Very good. Yeah, we'll be doing plenty of networking today. I don't know if I remember the questions, but we'll figure this out. Nope, not security today. Security Plus will be next week at this time. So next Wednesday at this exact same time. So you'll, of course, anybody who's watching this either live or on the replay, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll be able to see exactly what's going on. Next month, the calendar is a little weird. It's a little bit different than normal. It's a little chaotic. It's a little wrench in the whole gear set. So make sure you check the calendar if you're planning to stop in next month, because it's a little bit different. It's a lot different. Welcome Kansas City. Welcome Knoxville, Tennessee. There's it's good to have you here. There is so that's East Coast, a little Midwest. I'm looking for the far edges. I try to do this at noon Eastern time, so I really want to get everybody I can in this particular awake time. So it would be Europe and California. That's the stretch. And right then, just as I'm saying that, we get hello from England. Welcome. And Vegas is here. So there's our Galway is here. Very nice. So we've got this broad. That's what I'm hoping for, is to cover that base by doing this at this time of day. But of course, the replays are always available. You can always go out and watch the replays whenever you'd like. Nebraska is here. Welcome. Hello, LA. I'm guessing that's not Lloyd Acres, which is where I grew up. LA was Lloyd Acres. Lloyd is, I grew up in a town that to this day does not have an actual traffic light in it. The entire county to this day does not have a traffic light in it. And there was a little tiny town 10 miles away called Lloyd. I don't know, population 15, 20, 100 maybe. And so there was a little subdivision in Lloyd, out in the woods, called Lloyd Acres. So we'd always refer to that as L.A. Oh, he lives out in L.A. we amused ourselves by doing that. So that's what that was about. Columbus, welcome. I talk often about Dublin in my videos, so think about that. Chicago is here. North Texas. Very good. Thank you for being here. Nollins checking in. Southern Cali. That's good. There's Cary, North Carolina. I'm now going up the list. I'm going backwards now. Virginia's here. We've got another. For those of you that have just joined us, I know the messages have just gone out. You've probably just gotten here. It's the Network Plus Study Group today. We have about 4 minutes to go before we get started. This is the pre-show. I have folks that send me messages every week wondering, why are you recording the pre-show? Why don't you just jump right into it? Why don't you start at the top of the hour for that? So I apologize if you just don't enjoy seeing the back of my head from this part, but we will get started shortly. Fortunately, if this is on the replay, you can fast forward over all of this. You won't have to see any of this or listen to me talk about the folks joining us from Jordan, which is nice. We are getting a broad scope of people checking in. It's always good. It's hard to do Q&A if it's just the Q part, if nobody's actually doing the A part. So it's very nice that you're here. Oh, great. You love the pre-show, especially when I have issues and I have to work on them. That is the worst possible pre-show. That is not the pre-show we're shooting for. This is hot coffee today. It's usually hot. It's usually a hot beverage. I try not to do a cold beverage during the study group just because it helps with the throat. After talking for an hour, it's nice to be able to have a hot beverage to do that. So this is, today it's a Pete's coffee and, of course, my Contigo mug. And the reason I like the Contigo mug, so this is not a Contigo mug commercial, but this is a full mug of coffee, and it just does not spill. If you're looking for if you've ever struggled with trying to find a mug that could not possibly leak anywhere, this is Contigo, CoNTIGO. And again, I have no affiliation with Contigo. I just have it in my studio. I don't bring things in my studio that are going to fall over onto these. This equipment costs a good chunk of change, so I don't want to mess up anything there. Jeffrey's here from Ireland. Welcome. And the pre-show, I've actually simplified the pre-show configuration quite a bit. There used to be sort of different things happening with the way this is set up. And in the past few months, I have completely changed practically every piece of equipment I use for video in here. Really, I guess I have. The device I use for streaming, the device I use for video switching, the devices I use for video capture, everything is that way. Tampa's here. Welcome, Tampa. We're getting into that season, aren't we? So we have to get these done before the storms roll in. I understand. We'll work on that. We're almost ready to go. We've got a minute to go. I guess I should figure out what I'm doing on my side with these things. I think we've got the right thing in place. Streaming is good. That's my streaming view. You can't see the television that's in front of me, but it's like a 50-inch television that is showing me the video switching interface. We've got what you're going to see on one view. We've got what you're going to see on the other view. I should probably bring that up. So it's ready to go. There it is. There's the slides. So I think we're in good shape. One of these days I will do some type of overview as to what's going on here. I want to do a map, a network diagram, and a design overview of this so that you can see exactly what craziness is involved in making this happen, because it is kind of interesting. Now that we've upgraded everything to 4K, we're hitting there right at that brand new set of technologies that are difficult to really understand what's going on. There was a lot of research that went into this, so it'd be nice to share that with others. And it's time to get started. Let's do a study group, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2019 Network Plus Study Group from your friends here at Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us again. We have been talking in the chat room just before we got started about how much we want to do Network Plus today. We've been talking about Network Plus, Network Plus, Network Plus, and then we have other people showing up wondering, what are we doing today? It's all Network Plus today. Of course, the first hour is really Network Plus. It's all Q&A. It's all interactive. I will ask you questions. You will answer those questions live and online and interactively thanks to the wonder of the internet. Although in the second hour, it's not all Network Plus. The second hour is open phone lines, and you're welcome to call in about Network Plus questions or anything else that you may have on top of mind. You're more than welcome to call really about any topic whatsoever. We're going to talk mostly today about Network Plus, though. And certainly in this first hour, we're going to talk all about the latest version of Network Plus. Remember that we do one of these study groups every month. There's no fee or charge or anything associated with that. You can, of course, get my weekly Network Plus pop quiz question on the Twitter by going to professormesser.com/Twitter. That comes out on Tuesdays. And, of course, all of my Network Plus videos, my entire training course, everything that I create for these training courses is available for you to watch absolutely free every minute of every video. There's no registration. There's no paywall. There's nothing restricting you from getting access to this information. You can find it all on my website at professormesser.com, or if you like to go over to the YouTube playlist, you can find it at professormesser.com/YouTube. That consists, of course, of all of my videos. Although some people like to have offline versions of these videos, and there are offline versions available. You can find those at professormesser.com/getnetplus. GETNETPLUS, which are not only the 1080p HD video versions of Network Plus, but I also have audio versions of those that I've created. So you can download those, put them on your mobile device, listen when you're in your car, listen while you're working out. Or, of course, my course notes. This comes with the bundle. The course notes are there. We'll talk more about the course notes in a bit. That may be something that helps you as well. There are Network Plus pop quiz questions on my website. Some people like to do a little Q&A. I take the questions that we do during the study group and I put them into that Q&A list. You can find those at professormesser.com/popquiz. And for those of you that like to listen to this study group after the fact, there is a podcast version of this that is created. Of course, the video replays are always available on my website and on YouTube, but some people like to have it automatically downloaded into their podcast app. If you've never done this, it's like magic. You subscribe to all these podcasts, and anytime you pick up your mobile device, all of the latest podcasts have been automatically downloaded, and they're waiting for you. So you could be on a plane, you could be away from the internet, and you still have all of the latest podcasts sitting there. You can, of course, play the podcast from this page as well. You can find that all at professormesser.com/podcast. And for those of you that head over to YouTube, you'll notice that about a day after we finish these study groups, there is a full and complete timestamp of everything we did. So if you're trying to figure out where in the podcast, where in the study group did we talk about this, the timestamp is right there on YouTube in the YouTube descriptions, thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who has to sit here and listen to this whole thing and take timestamps. Hi, Lori. Thanks for doing that. And I think other people like to have access to that as well. So pretty useful to have those things. There is plenty to talk about today relating to Network Plus. This is going to be all about the latest Network Plus exam version. That exam version is N10007. This was released March of 2018, so it's been out just over a year now. This is a relatively new exam. Networking exams don't tend to change very quickly because networking, generally speaking, does not change as rapidly as perhaps other parts of technology. But that's okay. We still update this every 3 years, and this version's only been out a year. It is a 90-minute exam, 90 questions on this exam, so that's an important thing to consider as well. These are a combination of multiple choice questions and questions that are not multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions, and they might be questions that are fill in the blank. They might be questions that are asking you to put things in a particular order. They could be matching questions. They could be drag and drop questions. It's everything you've already learned, but asked of you in a different way. And we're going to do a performance-based question today. By the way, if you do not have a copy of these exam objectives, make sure you download a copy. That should be the first thing you do by going to professormesser.com/objectives. Although someone told me my link is not working anymore, so I have to fix my link. Somebody send me a reminder. Lori, please send me a reminder when this is done. See, now I'm just asking her to do things because she has to watch this thing. Remind me to fix the objectives link. You can, of course, go to Google, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will take you right to the page. You'll have no problem finding those objectives. Those are pretty important. They tell you everything you need to know to pass the exam. It's like magic. Nobody else does this, so make sure you have those objectives. Today we're going to do Q&A, and I want you to participate. If you're watching this live, you can answer the questions as we go along and then see how you did. And you can do that by using a third-party service I like to use called Socrative. Socrative is a service that you can either pop open a new browser window and get to automatically by going to professormesser.com/QA. So that will take you right to the question that's waiting for you right now. There's also an app that you can download for your mobile device. You're looking for the Socrative Student app. There's also a Socrative Teacher app or Instructor app. That's the one for me. You want the Student app, and that one will probably ask you for a room name. The room name that it asks for is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right, or you will not be in the right room. There won't be a question waiting for you, because there is indeed a question waiting for you on these. You want to be able to see that question by going to this view. This is the question. It's asking you, a network engineer is connecting two switches together in the data center. Which type of cable would be the best choice for this connection? Now, if you think this sounds familiar, it is. This is our rewind question of the month. This is a question we did last month that we're giving to you again, not only to see if you remember the answer, but this is also a good test to see if you're able to get in here and be able to answer the question in the Socrative front end. What I see on my side is this. This is the question itself. A network engineer is connecting two switches directly together in the data center. What type of cable would be the best choice for this connection? Is it crossover, straight through, serial, loopback, or shielded? And as you can see interactively in real time, I can see your answers coming through. And as we're looking at this, we can see 82% of you have said crossover. If we had to place some bets here, that's the one we would probably bet on. I would imagine most of you have chosen crossover for that. 11% said, though, straight through. We'll just use straight through cable. That would be the best choice. 4% said serial. We have 1% loopback and 1% shielded. As we go through these questions today, it's useful that we do not answer in the chat room. Please don't give me any hints in the chat room. We're all going to go through here and try not to spoil it for others. We want to be sure that we're able to guess this part. Well, many of you said crossover. So is that really the best possible answer for crossover? I would like to know if it really is, and perhaps you want to know as well. In fact, let's have a look for this. If you're getting invalid room, make sure you have the right room name, PROFESSORMESSER. That's the room. In fact, crossover cables is the best way to connect devices that are like devices. And by like, I mean it's an MDI to MDI device or an MDIX to MDIX device. In other words, if it's a switch to switch, it's a crossover. If it's a router to router, it's a crossover. If it's a workstation to workstation, it's a crossover. That's a good way to do it. Anytime you're assigning an IP address to a device, I kind of think of it that way. That's not entirely accurate, but that's the way in my mind I sometimes think of this. If it has an IP address and the other side has an IP address, stick a crossover cable between them. On most modern Ethernet devices, though, the devices themselves can tell what's on the other side and will internally automatically configure this to be either crossover or not crossover, depending on what you're connecting to. So for most of us, it's not even going to be an issue at all. We'll very simply just connect them up, and no matter what cable we're using, it magically works. That is not exactly how you should be doing crossover, though. You should really be specifying this. I mention this because there are situations with certain chipsets of Ethernet that I've run into in the past that if it was a crossover connection and you put in a straight through cable, it would do its MDIX crossover, auto MDIX capability, but the chipset had a bug and it performed poorly when it did that. So I like to lock it in. And if it needs crossover, I put a crossover cable. If it needs straight through, I put a straight through cable, and then you're not going to run into an issue. That's one of the best ways to look at doing that. So those of you that did answer crossover, that is the right answer. It is a crossover cable. That's exactly what we want to have on the exam. So you did a great job with that. Now we're ready to move forward with the new questions of the month. So are you? Hopefully all of you are ready as well. I think I've got some ready to go. For those of you that have not taken a CompTIA exam before, the first handful of questions you get on the exam are not multiple choice questions. This throws some people sometimes. They're not ready for what they're getting on the exam. Suddenly they're getting these questions that are very, very unexpected. They're not what they expected when they saw these exams. So one of the things that I mention always in these study groups is that you want to be able to look at and have an example of a performance-based question first thing. So if you go back and look at all of the replays of our Network Plus study groups going back for at least a couple of years now, the first question we do is not a multiple choice question. The first question we do is a performance-based question, so you can get some feel or some idea of what a performance-based question might be. And the performance-based question I have for you today, it's not a fill in the blank. It's not putting you at a command prompt and asking you to do something. It is not a drag and drop. I guess in some ways it could be. I want you to put things in a particular order. And here is your performance-based question of the month. Put these technologies in order from slowest throughput to fastest. And I have 5 technologies here. So this should be pretty easy, right? 5 technologies. The first is OC12. The second is cable broadband. The third is 10G base T. The fourth is T3, and the last one is 802.11g. Some of these have a range of these, so keep in mind the range you're thinking about, and we'll see if we're thinking the same way. You're not being graded on this, so you can't go wrong. If you think they're already in the order from slowest throughput to fastest, you can simply answer A, B, C, D, E, because it's a fill-in-the-blank question online. There's no way to have you match this up, to turn things around online and do this. So you can put it in its order that you think it is. If you think it's slowest to fastest is A, B, C, D, E, lock in your answer. Make a note of what your answer is, because on Socrative, it doesn't tell you what your answer was. You can, once you lock it in, it kind of disappears from you, which is just the way it works. It's not my front end, so we're doing the best we can with what we have here. Hopefully that's the things you're working with as well. Put those technologies in order from slowest throughput to fastest. Hopefully you have an idea of what these are. A lot of people, when they're working through these exams, will tell me, I have to memorize all of these feeds and all of these speeds. Yes, you do. And in networking, you do have to know these off the top of your head. You're sitting in a meeting. Somebody says, we have a new application we're putting in. Here are the requirements for the application. What type of connectivity is going to be the best for us? And you can't say, well, wait a second. Let me Google every single one of these on my mobile device as we're sitting here in this meeting with everybody waiting, and let me see if I can remember which one's the fastest and which one's the slowest. Nobody's going to have you hired as a network administrator for very long. You do have to understand these. And one of the things that you'll find is that once you get into the business and you start working with these, you start memorizing, you already know what they are. It's not a case where it's some weird esoteric technology that you've never seen before. You're going to see it all the time. You're going to know exactly what the speeds are. So don't worry so much as you're trying to learn this that it seems overwhelming. It seems like it's pointless. There actually is a point to this. You actually do need to know these throughputs. They become very useful to know these. And then you'll find that once you start working with them, it just becomes second nature. So that's almost like anything else, really, as we go through it. Let's see how you did. We've had a number of you are still busy Googling these. So we're going to jump ahead while you Google this, because a number of you are putting in here, I don't know what you're talking about, OC12. What in the world is that? So I will step through each one of these and give you a feel for what these are. Let's see which one you think we should start with, the slowest throughput in that list. Anybody care to take a guess which one the slowest one is? The first one that I put on this list as slowest is a T3. T3 very commonly used for serial type connectivity, point-to-point. Older style serial technologies use this. T3 is as a maximum throughput or common throughput of 44.736 megabits per second. Obviously, if you're running a 100 megabit Ethernet on your network, you're probably using a gigabit Ethernet. Then a T3 is much slower than the networks that we use internally on our networks today. In fact, it's really much slower than what we use for wide area networking these days. But there's still quite a bit of T3 technology that you will run into. One thing about networking is once it gets installed, it's very difficult to transition that to something else. It's not something you can unplug and just plug something new into. There's a project behind this. You have to buy new equipment. There is a changeover process. There is testing that has to be done with all of these. So that's one that you have to think about for this and being able to work through it. The second one on the list, care to take a guess what number 2 is? It is answer E, 802.11g. The maximum theoretical throughput of 802.11g wireless is 54 megabits per second, just a little bit faster than that older T3 technology. Back in the day, though, that was pretty good for wireless, for being able to plug in and connect to your network at 54 megabits per second over a wireless network. Phenomenal. Fantastic. That is exact. And of course, these days, we've well exceeded those technologies with 802.11 AC and the ones that are coming soon. So that's one that you'll run into. This third one, though, there's some room for discussion because the third one I put in my list is cable broadband. And I just kind of put in the sort of the middle range of what you would often find with cable broadband technologies. So I put in 250 megabits per second, although here in the studio, I've got 1 gig. I've got 1,000 megabits per second throughput on download here in the studio. And I have very different going the other direction. So you find there are different technologies available depending on what you have for cable broadband. But I just put that one right in the middle just as a stopping point. I think it's probably a good one to put at, but you may find larger ranges certainly in use for cable broadband. But you'll notice the ranges I put in here, the next one on the list is so far beyond 250 megabits per second that it's not an issue, and that would be OC12. OC12 technology, this optical carrier 12 technology commonly used with SONET type networking. If you're a carrier network, these are the types of network connections you would see. OC12 is 622.08 megabits per second. Boy, that 08 is so important, isn't it? That's what it is. Whenever we talk about OC12, OC3 and OC12, we talk about 155, we talk about 622. We never use the 0.08. But I put it in here just because I get emails and I don't want to get emails from you. So there you go. That's and in fact, for those of you like me that get 1 gig throughput, switch those two around. Maybe OC12 is slower than your cable broadband. Completely acceptable answer. And I get that. And this was intentionally done in this question so that you could think about where you would put it in this range. This is not graded. You're not going home with anything or worrying about not getting these right. We're learning as we go. That's the whole point of this. The last one on the list is the only one left, and that is a 10G base T. For those of you that are familiar with the naming convention used in these Ethernet standards, 10G base T is 10 gig or 10,000 megabits per second. It is 1,000. Whenever you start working with these and trying to figure out 10 gig, like 1 gig is 1,000 megabits, 10 gig, 10,000 megabits. These are very high-speed networks that we're dealing with now. 10 gig has been a phenomenal increase in speed over gigabit Ethernet. And of course, we're even bundling these 10 gig links together into 40 gig connections. And in some cases, we've got 10 gig bundled together. And of course, we're coming up with standards these days that take 10 gig and take it to the next level to 100 gig and even faster than that, which is pretty remarkable. If you're someone who's trying to move a lot of data, suddenly your network is not the slowest thing you're dealing with. Suddenly you're now having to deal with problems in storage devices slowing everything down. There's a switch. So there's our list from slowest technologies to fastest. We have T3, 802.11g, cable broadband, OC12, and 10G base T. And of course, you could switch the third and the fourth, depending on the type of cable broadband you would run into and having those things available as well. Hopefully, that was a performance-based question that you could sink some teeth into and think about. If you're not familiar with these throughputs, this is something you may want to spend some time on. You could certainly be asked questions on the exam that would ask you to find the best solution for a particular scenario, and you would need to know what some of these throughputs might be. So there you go. That's a good example of what you would run into. I've got more questions for you. Let's do another one. This one is, well, I don't know if the next one actually is a multiple choice question. Let's see if it is. This may be another fill-in-the-blank question. It is a fill-in-the-blank question that asks you, what connector is this? And I just stuck a connector up on the screen. So this is a difficult one for those of you that are listening on the podcast. I will give you a description of what this particular connector looks like, and then maybe that will help some of the folks that are here as well. So the connector I have on the screen, the connector seems to be kind of D-shaped. I think that's reasonable to say. The connector also, if we count the number of pins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pins. There are 9 pins in there, and it's kind of a D-shaped connector. That's a pretty good description, I think, for those of you listening on the podcast, where I ask, what connector is this? And this is one where if you start looking at it and trying to figure out those details, you may be familiar with what connection this happens to be. In fact, this is a connector you should absolutely be familiar with. You probably, if you went through the A+, you probably saw this connector. You probably remember it. For those of you in Network Plus, you should absolutely be familiar with this connector. It's an important one to know about as you're going through this. And we're getting answers that are coming in. Some of you are spot on. Some of you are choosing a different answer that I was not expecting for these as well to work through this piece. So make sure you're familiar with what these are. In fact, you'll notice here, there's both male and female. I got both sides of the connector, if you will, on this one, just so you can get a feel for this. I got a better picture. Let's bring up the better picture of this. There we go. Now you can really see those connectors, get a close-up view of what those are. These are important to know if you are a network professional. I'm waiting for a few more answers to come in. Some of you are still putting those in and getting those answers coming in. This is a really good one to know if you're a networking professional. So make sure you're familiar with this particular connector type. It's going to be pretty important for you. All right, we've got some answers that have come in. Let's see how we did with this one. I'm not going to show you the multiple choice. There's no way to roll up the multiple choice answers in here. So let me just give you the answer of what this happens to be. Well, when we saw the D sub-miniature connection, and we saw that there were 9 pins, the D sub-miniature means it starts with a D. The actual size of that D is actually E-sized, so technically it's a DE9, but in the industry, we call it a DB9. This is because it's really just idiosyncratic. When the earlier version of this technology came out, it was a 25-pin connector. You can't see it because my head's in the way there. Can I get my head out of the way so you can see that? I probably could. So on this, you'll notice that there are different sizes. There's a DA, DB, DC, DD, and DE. When we had serial connections first come out, it was a B-size connector, and so we called it a DB25. Well, we very quickly found a way to shrink that interface down and have a serial connection that was a 9-pin connection, and it's a DE connection. But we were so accustomed to saying DB25 that we all just started calling it DB9. And in the industry, that's what you'll pretty much hear it called, is a DB9 connector, even though it isn't. It's not even close to being DB9 connector. That's not what it's called. It's called a DE9 connector. But if I say that, there will be plenty of people telling me I'm wrong. On the exam, on anything you see, on anything in the industry, it's a DB9. We just call it DB9. You can call it DE9, and you may at times even see it referenced as DE9. But speaking with someone with knowledge on this, people will send you emails and complain that you call it a DE9, even though it isn't. You will not be asked on any question is this DB9 or DE9? Which one is it? You won't be asked that. Nobody's going to ask you that. It's a DB9. Nobody calls it DE9. And nobody's going to ask you to choose between those. So that's not an issue at all. This is commonly used to send serial connectivity. Serial connectivity is using a standard type of connection called an RS-232. So sometimes people will call this, it's an RS-232 connection because you're sending serial connections over that. Yes, I will read all the questions in my nerd voice. That's how I talk normally. This is my radio voice. When I'm at home, honey, can I get some coffee? That would be great, thanks. It's really nice like that. Whenever you're working with communication on plugging into a switch and configuring it, plugging into a router and configuring it, if you're not connected to the network, then you're connecting to a serial connection that's somewhere on that device. The serial connection on that device these days is usually USB. Could even be an RJ45 type connection using those serial pins. But you'll notice on the back of your laptops, on the back of your mobile devices, sometimes there will be a 9-pin serial connection, but most of the time you have to get a converter cable of some kind that is a USB to DB9 so that you can then plug into the DB9 that is on the switch or the router or whatever it happens to be. This is one of the challenges you have with being a network administrator. I will tell you that ask anyone who's a network administrator, they have a series of console cables that they use. They have some that are DB9. Maybe they have one that is an interface that converts between a DB9 to an RJ45. Maybe they have another one that is a full straight through USB connection. You pull out all these cables. These are the cables I use to connect to the myriad devices on my network so that I can walk into the closet, plug into it, and gain access to this system. The serial connections, interestingly enough, folks in the chat room are saying they still put DB9 connections on devices. They do. There are a number of laptops you can get that specifically put DB9. Can anyone guess why? Because of the U.S. federal government. That's why. There are so many devices that are these legacy devices, and they don't want to use a converter cable between these. You want to plug directly into DB9. So there's never underestimate the power of someone who buys a lot of equipment. They can force manufacturers to put different interfaces on laptops. Now, I would agree, a lot of the newer laptops that are designed for consumer use, you're not going to find DB9 connectors or serial connectors. You'll have USB, which technically is a serial connection, and you use the USB adapter. People are saying, yeah, you just use a USB adapter. I've said, yes, you just use a USB adapter. It actually requires some special drivers. It's not as easy sometimes as simply plugging it in and using the adapter. So this is what you run into when working through these network issues. So that is the correct answer. It's a DB9 connection. I will accept DE9 as well. So you can choose either one of those. That is the connector type, and you still need to use those for those connections and being able to make them connect. If you're walking around, make sure you have plenty of DB9 cables and alternates in your bag as you're going through the network. Let's do some multiple choice questions now. I've got one for you that's multiple choice, and this one is asking about CSU DSUs. The question asks, which of the following would commonly be labeled on a CSU DSU? Which of these would commonly be labeled on a CSU DSU? Would it be application type? Would it be speed and duplex? Would it be version number? Would it be circuit ID? Or would it be IP utilization? Which one of those would it be? Which of the following would commonly be labeled on a CSU DSU? Would it be application type? Would it be speed and duplex? Would it be version number? Would it be circuit ID? Or would it be IP utilization? If you want to follow along, you can answer the question and see the video at professormesser.com/live. You can go there and participate in the chat room, and instructions will be there on how to answer this question, which easily can be done from professormesser.com/QA. You can find all of those there to have those pieces. This can be extremely important, so you should absolutely know what is labeled on your CSU DSU. This is actually labeling is not a big section, but there's a section of the Network Plus exam on labeling, which is fantastic. Labeling is so important in our industry. We sometimes forget. It's not that important when you're plugging it in. It's important a month later when you're trying to find the two ends of the cable. That can be useful. Or just understand, what is this cable? What is this plugged into? Where did this come from? We spend a lot of time in networking sometimes tracing back cables unnecessarily and trying to figure out what it is that's plugged in. So make sure you're familiar with this idea of labeling and where it would go, and make sure you check those labeling pieces of the exam objectives. Those can be useful as well. I'm going to take a sneak peek and see how we're doing with this one. Let's have a look at how you've answered this one so far. Everybody's Googling this one, I can tell. I watch the numbers as they're counting up. I look at this number right here. We have 161 people in here that are answering questions. 78 of you, not even half, have answered. That means there's Googling. Stop Googling. Just take a guess. Just take a stab at it right now, and you'll figure out. For this, Range Lab in the chat room, you had an installer run over 48 lines once without a single label, and he was never heard from again. Last time. That's painful to even think about that. Hopefully you were able to resolve that. Let's see how you did with this particular answer. 56% of you, we got a majority, said B, speed and duplex. We had 32% of you that said circuit ID, and then it drops way off to single digits at that point. A tie for third at 4% between version number and IP utilization, and 3%, which is effectively a tie for third with application type. So the only ones really in the running here, and the one that's far ahead right now, is speed and duplex at 56%, and 31% said circuit ID. So once you've now had a look at this particular question, the real important part of this is the part that talks about CSU DSU. Whenever you see that, you should automatically in your mind think, all right, we're dealing with some type of wide area network connection. We're dealing with some type of network connection coming from a third-party provider, coming into a CSU DSU, and now from the CSU DSU, it very commonly has a serial connection that is then connecting into a router or some other type of networking component. So this CSU DSU is kind of the middle point between the inside of your network and the inside of the provider's network. You're sort of splitting where everything's happening. Technically, it's the DMARC that is the middle point. But if we're looking for the first device that sits in the middle, it's commonly the CSU DSU. That means if you're going to run into a problem, you walk up to the CSU DSU and suddenly you get red lights here instead of the green lights, or maybe there's no lights instead of the green lights. Now we have to find out what happened to the WAN link. You got people calling now from the remote location. We can't connect down to our applications. Nobody's able to get connectivity. Oh gosh, we need to call somebody about this. Let's call our wide area network provider. Let's get them on the phone. We'll call the 800 number. Hi, thank you for calling wide area network provider. What is your circuit ID? I don't know. I don't know what my circuit ID is because I didn't label it on the CSU DSU. But that is the important component that the wide area network provider uses to now focus in on exactly the circuit that we're talking about. So those are the types of things that would be useful. It also would be useful if the phone number for the wide area network provider's help desk was also labeled somewhere on the CSU DSU. If you have a problem with this circuit, call this phone number, give them the circuit ID. And then what they commonly do at that point is they perform a loopback. They tell your equipment, loop back to us. They try to send traffic through that loopback. If they can receive the traffic that they've sent, they know everything is fine down to their equipment, and then you'll be fine. You have to now, they'll tell you, oh, it's not us, it's you, and they hang up the phone. And then, of course, it turns out they ran the wrong loopback. It really was their problem. It's a different issue. I'm just being bitter at this point. Let's not even go down that road. They loop back with a smart jack, or they have you put in a loopback cable to loop it back that way. There's a couple ways to do that. So these circuit IDs can be very, very useful to have that there. And the CSU DSU, certainly a circuit ID is going to be the important one. 33% of you did choose circuit ID. A CSU DSU does not commonly connect to an Ethernet network. It commonly has a wide area network connection on one side, which usually comes in over what looks like an RJ45 connection. Technically, it's wired a little bit differently into something like an RJ48C or an RJ48S. That's just semantics at this point, but it looks like an RJ45 cable, has the same type of connector on the end of it. That's coming from the WAN side. And then on the other side, it could be a myriad of different types of connectors, but it's commonly some type of serial connection, a DB25, a DB9, a V.35, or some other type of serial connection. So there's no Ethernet there. So speed and duplex doesn't apply in this particular scenario. Now, of course, speed and duplex is important on practically any type of topology, but whenever we see the term speed and duplex in networking, we're usually thinking about Ethernet. And in the case of a CSU DSU, those are not your biggest concerns. Speed and duplex are not something that is the issue, and normally you wouldn't label that on the CSU DSU. A much more commonly labeled parameter is the circuit ID, and in fact, the most important piece if you run into a problem. If you answer D, circuit ID, 33% of you got that one right. Didn't quite get to the 50% I like to see, but 2/3 of us now know what we should expect to see on a CSU DSU. And when you start that first job and they show you, well, here's our CSU DSU rack, and you're thinking, where are the circuit IDs labeled? They will tell you, oh, that's a good idea. We should put circuit IDs on here. You know, we've run into that before. We've had a problem and we had to tell the provider what the circuit ID was. And you would already know that. You would already be aware of that particular issue. That's a good one to know. So keep that one in mind as you go through this. One of the challenges with Network Plus, of course, is there's tons of things you have to know about. All about how to label cables, how to understand those speeds and those feeds, understanding subnetting and protocols and port numbers and topologies and interfaces with copper and fiber and everything else. And of course, all of my videos have this information in them. And I highly recommend you go through all of my videos and take notes. But as you're aware, there's about 100 videos that you have to watch for Network Plus. There's a few more than that, I think. So that's a lot of videos to go through and take notes. One of the things that I've done is I've already taken the notes for you. And I've got notes available on my website that you can purchase and download, and you'll have access to everything that I have in these videos. All of the text, all the graphics, all of the charts that I create, they're all in there. So if you're someone who you don't have time to do this, or some of you have said, I like that you made these videos for free. Here's some way that I can help contribute back to the effort. I got to tell you, it goes a long way. And I really do appreciate you supporting the website and what we're doing in that way, because when you purchase these notes, I'm thinking you're getting something that's valuable, but I'm also able to keep making more videos because of it. So thank you so much. These are the course notes. It's a PDF. And you can just flip through the PDF. I start in the first video. They are all labeled. They are all numbered. You can go to any one. Let's go to WAN. Let's find one we were talking about. WAN services. We'll click on that one. So there's our T1, E1, T3, E3, all of the Sonnet, OC12. There's our 622.08 megabits per second. And of course, the description of all of those that come directly from my website. This is something that you can download and have available immediately in your hands. Of course, there's also a physical version available. It's exactly the same information. There's nothing new in this. This is the book version. The physical edition of the course notes contains exactly the same information in it. There's our chart we were just looking at with the OC3, OC12, T3. It's just in a book form. We call a perfect bound, like a standard softback book. And it's in full color, because a lot of what we do in this, with especially things like cables and other things, it's nice to have a color view of those. High quality, very nice paper. I wouldn't do it any other way. This is Mrs. Professor Messer said, you should make a book version of that. It's so valuable. And she was right. Sometimes people like to have that book version. So this is definitely one that's available to you. If you get the book version, I, of course, will ship this to you. So it'll arrive in your mail. I also give you for free the digital version as well. So when you buy the book version, you can download the PDF immediately, start reading through the PDF, and then usually in the US, in about a week or so, you will get the physical version in the mail. All of that is available on my website. You can find out more about it, professormesser.com/NPCN7, and it's another good way to help support what we're doing here with the videos. Let's go through and look at what we are doing with all of the other pieces. In fact, if you go through and try to get more questions on this, I like to cram in as many questions as possible. So let's keep going with those and see what we can do. Here we go. The question that we have next is, a system administrator needs to harden the security of a file server. Which of the following would best meet this requirement? Would it be A, upgrade the BIOS, B, reinstall the operating system from the original media, C, replace the internal drives with USB connected storage, D, disable system restore, or E, enable SNMP monitoring? So the question is that a system administrator needs to harden the security of a file server. Which of the following would best meet this requirement? And there are 5 things here that are real things you could do, but only one of them best meets the needs of hardening the security of this file server. Is it upgrade the BIOS, reinstall the operating system from the original media, replace the internal drives with USB connected storage, disable system restore, or enable SNMP monitoring? You think you know the answer? Go to professormesser.com/QA. You can, of course, figure out which one of those you should be looking at, which one of those you should be considering when hardening your file server. Some of you may have even done this before, gone through the process of having to harden a system and make sure that it is running optimally for all of these. Make sure you're familiar with this. There is a section of the Network Plus exam objectives that goes into security. In fact, you'll see security on A+, you'll see security on Network Plus, you'll, of course, see more security on Security Plus, but that's because it's up to everybody to make sure that the systems are secure. Make sure you're familiar with these as well. System administrator hardening the security of a file server. Only one of those really best meets this requirement. This is when you really have to go through each one of these and really understand from a security perspective what that is doing. I think a number of you have taken a step into figuring out those pieces, figuring out how to harden the security of a file server. Hopefully you've gone through these pieces. I think some of you may have even run into this before, I'm noticing. So as we look at these answers that are coming through, this is a multiple choice, so hopefully you can choose one of those. By the way, if you don't know which one it is, you should do this also on the exam. Just take a guess. On the exam, what we know of the grading, because CompTIA doesn't share their grading methodology with us, but what we believe happens is that you are given points when you answer a question correctly. But perhaps more importantly, points are not subtracted if you get a question wrong. There's no penalty for getting a question wrong. So you can only benefit by taking a guess. And that would be a good one to do. If you don't know the answer, take a guess. Just choose A every time. Choose C every time. Choose the one you think would be closest to what you think it should be. That should be a good way to do this. Let's see how we did with this answer. A system administrator needs to harden the security of a file server. Which of the following would best meet this requirement? 70% said enable SNMP monitoring. 15% said upgrade the BIOS. 10% said disable system restore. And then lastly, reinstall the operating system from the original media and replace the internal drives with USB connected storage. Got about 2 to 3%. So not much there. If we go with the majority, 70% of us said enable SNMP monitoring. That's the way we would best meet that requirement. Would it best meet the requirement? Well, the answer may surprise you. In fact, the answer is to upgrade the firmware. The firmware is the software that gets a system running. In some cases, it can even be the software the system runs from all the time. For a file server, it would be the BIOS. For a router or switch, it might be the operating system of that device. Same thing for firewalls. That is the firmware of that device that gets things running. Very commonly, our network devices don't have a traditional operating system in there. Our firewalls generally aren't running Linux as the piece that we see anyway. Our switches and routers certainly are not running Windows or Mac OS. So they're running their own type of operating system that has been specifically designed for that piece of hardware. So one of the things you will find, of course, is that there can be security vulnerabilities in those pieces of software. There are security vulnerabilities in the BIOS, in the operating system of a switch or router, in that firmware. And one of the things you can do is to make sure that you're running the latest version of firmware so that you're covering all of those security patches that may have been added to those firmware pieces. Of course, you have to perform the same type of change control you do with anything else. Make sure that you have a way to roll back to a previous version. Make sure you have the previous version available for those pieces. So one of those, that's pretty nice to be able to upgrade and make sure that you're running the most secure version of firmware on that device. So let's look at your answers and let's break them down into why they would or would not be a good match for the requirement of hardening this particular server. We know at this point, if you answered A, upgrade the BIOS, the 16% of you said upgrade the BIOS. Those are the folks that got it right. If you answered A, that was the right answer. Now, 70% said enable SNMP monitoring. And enabling SNMP monitoring is usually a good thing to do anyway, but SNMP monitoring is used to gather metrics, statistics from that particular device. If you want to know what the CPU utilization is for the device, you can query it every minute or so to get statistics about how it's running. If you wanted to be informed of the uptime of that device, you can query those statistics with SNMP. If you want to know how much data has gone in and out of a particular Ethernet interface on that file server, you can query the server, ask that via SNMP, and the server will respond to you via SNMP to be able to do that. But having SNMP there and having the ability to monitor that device does not in any way make it more secure. It does not harden the device at all. It certainly allows you to monitor it, but generally the monitoring you're doing with SNMP is based upon performance and uptime. There's not really a lot of security SNMP that you're doing. Maybe you can at least get updates on when somebody logs in with an invalid login. Perhaps you can be informed via SNMP that that's occurred. But it's not something that is going to make your system more secure just by enabling it. In fact, I would argue that enabling additional services on a device inherently makes it less secure. Although that's not necessarily true with SNMP. Not always true. It's very rarely true when it comes to SNMP, but it could. Maybe there's a vulnerability with the SNMP implementation on that server, and by simply turning on SNMP, you have made the server less secure. It is a reality of security. The more things you turn on, the more opportunities there is now for a bad guy to find their way in. So that's one of those situations that is a significant problem. It's a challenge. It's just the give and take, the normal daily thing for a security professional. So enabling SNMP monitoring does not provide any additional hardening of that system, doesn't make it more difficult for a bad guy to get in there at all. There is, and it doesn't matter which version of SNMP we're talking about. It doesn't make your system more secure just by turning on SNMP. Now, the different versions of SNMP might encrypt the statistics that are sent across the network, but again, that has nothing to do with how hardened that operating system is on that system or any other part of that particular file server. 10% of you said disable system restore. System restore in Windows, of course, is a function that saves the configuration of your computer, of your server, of your device over time. So it will save the configuration of your operating system every day or when you install new software. So if you were to install new software onto this file server, you rebooted the server and realize, wow, that new software I installed really messed up my configuration. You can use System Restore to go back to a previous configuration. You click a button, and now you've got the configuration you were running prior to that new software installation. So that would not help you at all with making the file server more secure. It helps you if you run into a problem and you need to revert back. That's more of a recovery issue. It's a recovery function and not something that makes your system available to be more secure. Some people saying, yes, but System Restore is not available in Windows Server. Except I didn't say we were running Windows Server here either, but that's actually a good point that if this was Windows Server, that certainly would not be a correct answer either. 3% of you said replace the internal drives with USB connected storage. That sounds just a horrible thing to have to do, doesn't it? Can you imagine all your USB drives? That's what you're running. You have a server and there's 10 USB drives hanging out the back of it for this piece of it. Yes, file server does not imply Windows Server. Windows Server is a very specific operating system from Microsoft, and nowhere in this question did it mention the exact operating system that's on here. In fact, this is probably Linux. I don't know what it is. No knows. This is Mac OS. We don't know. It wasn't part of the question, and an important consideration when you're taking these tests is not to imply something that they are saying in the question. The question should be read exactly as it's given. You're not looking outside the scope of the question, and you're answering the question with the scope that they're providing as the question is read. So make sure you're familiar with that as well. So USB connected drives don't provide any additional security. If anything, that just makes it more difficult to manage. And reinstalling the operating system from the original media, probably the worst thing you can do to keep your system secure, because we come up with all of these new security patches as time goes on. So there's probably going to be vulnerabilities introduced by reverting back to a previous version of the operating system. You don't want to do that ever at all. So that's one that you run into. Whenever you run into those types of issues, this is one where I think whenever I run into those types of issues, I do not want to revert back to previous configurations. That would not be something you would do. So hopefully that's giving you some insight into hardening your system, making it more secure, and getting a feel for what you should do to make your system more secure, and in fact, what you should not do to make your system more secure. It's another good one to keep in mind as well. For those of you that are watching this video either live or on a replay for continuing education credit, I will give you an email that certifies that you were here, and I'll digitally sign it and send it to you if you follow these instructions. You must follow these instructions to earn this webinar category CEU for CompTIA or for whatever you'd like to use it for. You would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link on that, and it will contact me effectively is what that's doing. It asks you for a subject, and in that subject, if you could put that this is the May 2019 Network Plus Study Group, and in there also, it will ask you for your name and your email address. It's useful if you put that because I will send it back to you by name, and the only way I can get it back to you is if you put your correct email address. Some of you don't like to put your email in, and then you're wondering why you didn't get a response back. Well, it's because it bounced back because you gave me a fake email. I can't send you back the response. Do you see the problem there? I'm glad. Then somewhere in that message, and it can be the only thing in the message if you would like it to be, somewhere in there, put the word BIOS, B-I-O-S. BIOS is what we would like to do. So that's the one we want to have all of that there. And make sure that you put that in there. You send it back to me. You can put anything else in there you'd like as well. Just make sure that I can see that word BIOS, all the better, and having those pieces there. So make sure you're familiar with that. And in the chat rooms, folks are going, I don't see why BIOS makes it any harder. Makes hardening the operating system, makes hardening the system or the security of that device. Well, one of the challenges, of course, is that there are security issues associated with the firmware of these devices. And if you don't have the latest version of BIOS, then you don't have the latest security patches. So BIOS is one of those things where it's not common. You don't get a new BIOS every month. This is not something that commonly happens, but you will have manufacturers send you a note that say, well, we found a vulnerability in our BIOS and we need to upgrade that. And of course, the question asked, which of the following would meet the requirement of hardening? None of the other answers did. The only one here that could possibly provide any hardening of this particular device is to upgrade the BIOS. So even though it's rare, even though it's something that you don't commonly do, it's still a reality of what we do in networking and in security. So make sure you're familiar with those things as well. This is one where and you're right, some of these updates for a BIOS aren't about security. They're about adding other features. But this was a question about hardening. So again, take everything in scope of the question and take all of the answers as they are given in the scope of the question. Whenever we start going through these, this is what some people sometimes get wrapped around the axle when they're taking the exam, is that they start thinking outside this particular box that they have given you. This is a certification exam. We don't have time to write this. If you've ever taken an exam to get into law school, the question might have 3 or 4 paragraphs associated with it. We just don't have time for that in these exams. We're trying to say, here's a particular problem you're trying to solve. Here's some possible answers. Which one fits the best? And you have to figure that piece out, which, by the way, pretty common to run into if you're ever trying to figure this out. That's a pretty common thing to do during the day. So focus on the questions, focus on the answers. Don't go outside the scope, and you're going to do fine on the exam. Trust me. That will help you a lot. We got time for another question. Let's do one. Here we go. This is one that is something you might run into. The question asks, a computer in the accounting department is automatically assigning itself an IP address associated with the marketing department. And we know how much the accounting department and marketing department don't get along, so this is already a problem. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? I kind of read into that question a little bit, didn't I? Let's talk about this question again. A computer in the accounting department is automatically assigning itself an IP address associated with the marketing department. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a routing loop? Would it be an incorrect VLAN assignment? Would it be a speed duplex mismatch? Would it be that STP is enabled? Or would it be an incorrect wire map? That's one of those. That would be an issue. A computer in the accounting department automatically assigning itself an IP address associated with the marketing department. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a routing loop, an incorrect VLAN assignment, a speed duplex mismatch, STP is enabled, or an incorrect wire map? If you think you know the answer, go to professormester.com/QA and be able to do that. So your folks are still wrapped around the axle on the whole BIOS upgrade thing, aren't you? SNMP would be good so someone can't ping the device, but a BIOS update would harden it. Correct. I have no idea what you're asking. But SNMP has nothing to do with someone being able to ping the device or not. So SNMP is only for you, this network manager. In fact, if you get into networking, you're going to be doing a lot of SNMP. In fact, it's unusual not to use SNMP on a device. If a device has SNMP, we tend to turn it on because it's much more important to gather metrics from that device than anything else. That becomes really, really useful to have that there. Yes, ICMP is ping. Maybe that's where we're getting messed up there. SNMP, completely different than ICMP. They sound very similar, though. So those last two letters, they almost sound like exactly the same thing. But they are very, very, very different. SNMP, you're going to use all the time. In fact, the more familiar you get with using SNMP, using some type of SNMP front end to query that device, and then be able to properly examine the results of what you're getting back, the more valuable you're going to be for all of those. So it becomes handy to have all those pieces there. Make sure you become familiar with SNMP. There's some really nice SNMP front ends that you could use to be able to gather details. So what are people using these days for open source SNMP? Are we still using CompTIA? Are we still using those types of tools to be able to do that? There's a few new ones I saw, but I've not run yet. So for those, SNMP uses a lot of CPU utilization. Not necessarily, but it can. SNMP is obviously gathering a lot of metrics on that device. You would need to check with the manufacturer of that device to understand the overhead that running SNMP would bring onto that device. These days, SNMP doesn't use very much. These days, our processors and the things that we do with it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. So your biggest problem is perhaps the device that's querying it, that's gathering SNMP metrics from these hundreds of devices. That's usually your biggest problem. Let's see how we did with this question, though, that talks about this ongoing feud between accounting and marketing, and will it ever end? I'm not sure that's what the question was, but we're going to see what we have in our list of things. A computer in the accounting department is automatically assigning itself an IP address associated with the marketing department. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Well, 78% of you think that it's an incorrect VLAN assignment. We have 11% that said, yep, you got a routing loop. And then down to single digits, 8% said that's an incorrect wire map. 2% said it's a speed duplex mismatch. I'm really stuck on speed and duplex this month, by the way. Have you noticed that? And then 1% said STP is enabled. This is when, folks in the chat room are really concerned about this whole BIOS thing and that it being a controversial subject. Oh, just stick around. We're just getting started. We can certainly talk about that. 79% said incorrect VLAN assignment. Does that sound like something you would run into if somebody got an IP address they weren't expecting? That is exactly what you would run into. This is very common for network administrators to set up VLANs for particular areas of the company, and usually it's done organizationally. The shipping and receiving department has their own VLAN. The management of the company has their own VLAN. Marketing has their own VLAN. Accounting has their own VLAN. And we configure the VLANs on the switch. We could say if you're plugging into this interface on the switch, you're on VLAN 1. If you're plugging into this other interface on the switch, you're on VLAN 2, and so on. So sometimes we will mix up where the VLANs are coming from. And when we run into those scenarios, we have this VLAN mismatch where you effectively have been assigned a VLAN in the marketing department, but you're really in the accounting department. That's a switch misconfiguration. We need to go into the switch config, change the VLAN setting, change you from the marketing VLAN to the accounting VLAN, reboot your system or restart the network card, and now suddenly you will be assigned the correct DHCP address that will put you into the correct VLAN. So in this particular case, the 79% of you that said incorrect VLAN assignment, you got that one absolutely right. That is the right answer. That is the thing. Now, the real question is, does changing the VLAN harden the system or not? No, I'm just kidding. That has nothing to do with hardening. That is all about understanding where the VLANs are coming from. This is, and this, not only this topic, but every topic that's in here comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Those exam objectives are available by going to the Google machine, typing in CompTIA exam objectives. Look how much they list here. Everything is listed here. Microsoft doesn't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody else does this but CompTIA. They tell you everything that you need to know on the exam. People come to me all the time and say, what are the topics I really need to study? I point you right to the exam objectives because those are the topics you really, really, really need to study. Make sure you have those exam objectives. That should be the first thing you grab when you're studying. It should be the last thing you reference before you walk into your exam to make sure you really know. It makes a good checklist. You know exactly what's coming there. You know exactly what to expect when you walk into that exam. We've gone through an hour of Q&A. I can't believe it either. An hour of divisive, angry Q&A. It wasn't that bad. I think we did pretty good. I like it when you folks say, wait a second, does that really make sense? And we can go down that line. I think that's important and we should always do that. So keep doing that. I love it. There's also more of this coming next month. However, there are some slight changes to the schedule next month. Normally we do our Network Plus study group on a Wednesday. Usually it's the second Wednesday of the month, but look how things have changed. In June, our next Network Plus study group is going to be on a Tuesday, already throwing you a curveball. And on top of that, it's the fourth Tuesday of the month, the 25th. Well, that's certainly different, but I mention this because there will be a few changes. So next month, for instance, the A Plus study groups are on the 11th and the 13th. Network Plus is on the 25th, Security Plus on the 27th. I have some challenges with scheduling next month, and I didn't want to cancel this. I don't want to miss one of these, so it will be a little bit different to be able to get in here and figure out how to fit all of this in. So I will be creating all of my content early, and I'll make sure that we get both of those study groups done in that single week. So you can always check the calendar, though. It always tells you when the next event is going to be. Go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll know exactly when to show up. So just make a note of that if you'd like to show up for the next one. Of course, Security Plus study group is next month. Stick around for the next hour. I'm going to open up the phone lines. You can call in. You can yell at me about BIOS and hardware and anything else. I'll take it. I'm fine with that. Don't forget about our Twitter question of the week. That pop quiz question is on Twitter every Tuesday. Go to professormesser.com/Twitter. There's also on YouTube. If you want to see all of my Network Plus videos, you can, of course, go to my website or to the playlists on YouTube by going to professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about my course notes. You can find out more about those at professormesser.com/NPCN. And, of course, my calendar that is there as well. Thank you for being here in this first hour. We couldn't do the Q&A and have all of our fights and figure out what's right and what's wrong without you being here. And that's half the fun, isn't it? There's plenty that we're going to talk about in the next hour. I'm just going to open up the phone lines. We'll see what you'd like to talk about on the study group. If you have to go, I can appreciate that too. We'd love for you to come back next week for the Security Plus or next month to do another Network Plus study group. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Well, let's see if I can get things straightened on my side and get these phone lines ready to go so that you can see this as well. There I am back. Hi, everybody. This is, people are asking about my process. We will answer questions about my process in just a moment. I first, though, have to call in to my own show, and then I will tell you how to call in to my own show. and we'll do this in a moment. So there's a little bit of administration that takes place for just a minute or two. Thanks for hanging on. I have to go to the right website, which normally I would have up and running. But of course, that requires some forethought. And apparently, I'm not capable of that today. Let's start up my show and host it. And then I will call into my show. And then I will tell you how to call into my show. It's a multi-step process. It's one hopefully you've been able to figure out as we've gone along here. Let me click on my side and click this piece on my screen. Am I calling it? I think I am. I am. Look, it's calling in. It says, hi. I know. And I type in the secret numbers on my side, and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I will do that. That's a little redundant. And if I type them in correctly, it says,
welcome.
Welcome. I'm glad. So finally, we got that in there, which means that you can now call into the show. You're more than welcome to call in. The phone number is 855-785-7545 in the continental U.S. You're welcome to call in. That's a toll-free number. Costs you nothing to be able to call in. I'm also taking questions in the chat room. So we'll go through questions and ask important questions about pictures and fireplaces. So we've already got some coming in that I will answer as we go through, because I'm all about answering those. If you are calling anywhere else in the world, you can call me for free on Skype. Skype will take toll-free numbers. It costs you 0 Skype minutes. It costs you 0 amount to call in. I take care of the bill. All you have to do is go into Skype, put a +1 855-785-RJ45. That's +1 855-785-7545. That's the number on the screen. That's the one you call. That's the one that will make all of this happen. You can also put questions in the chat room. I'm more than happy to answer questions in there as well. Some folks asking, is there a full pop quiz available for Network Plus? Not yet. My plans are to shortly finish up the A+ videos that I'm working on, which happen very, very carefully now. We've shotgunned through 4 different video courses in the last less than a year. That's a lot of video courses in a single less than a year time frame. And now that that's sort of finishing up, my plan is to go back and create sample exams for all of these courses, including Network Plus. I don't have a time frame for that because I don't work so well with time frames. I can't. I don't know. I have no idea. As we get closer to it, though, I will have a pretty good idea of when that's coming. Right now, that's a little bit far away. It's certainly not in the short term. You won't see these in the next month, but that is the goal, is to be able to provide those as we go. So you've got options for that too. In the chat room also, this is an interesting topic to me because I'm the one creating the content. It might be an interesting topic to you for folks that are also planning to create content or would like to create content. There is, Professor, how do you acquire / come up with the pictures you use for your slides? So you've probably seen it. My slides, some of them are a little weird. Whenever I talk about collecting log files, there's a picture of a log. I can't say that's a huge jump. Whenever there's a picture about segmenting the network, there's a bento box. Well, this is how my brain works. That's how and sometimes you won't get them. Sometimes people will send me a note and say, I was watching the video and you talked about this VPN concentrator and you put orange juice on the screen. What are you talking about? Well, in my mind, I was thinking about orange juice concentrate, and somehow that turned into VPN concentrator. So they don't always work. These can't always be winners, people. This is just my brain, and you get to enjoy the ride along with me. So where they come from, though, is the important part. And part of the challenges with really making any content on the internet is making sure that you have content that you're not stealing from someone else. Intellectual property and copyright law is an important consideration for anybody creating any type of content. So I subscribe to a stock photo service that guarantees me that the photos that I'm using are licensed properly through them. And it has been. We've gotten very good response from them. It's not inexpensive, but it guarantees me that I'm not going to run into any type of copyright problems. Even if you grab pictures from these websites that say, here's a website full of free pictures that you can use for anything you'd like to use. Well, I've used those before. And then the owner of the picture showed up and said, oh, no, that's not free. You owe me money now. And there becomes a legal issue, and then there's lawyers involved. And anytime there's lawyers involved, there's money involved. it's a mess. So I don't get into that. I simply go to a third party where and it's great. There's millions of pictures. I'm doing a video on VPN concentrators. I type in the word orange juice. I get a picture of orange juice and I put it in the video and you're stuck with it. Sorry. That's just the way that goes for me. I do have these phone lines open. I saw someone did call in. They got sick of me talking and hung up. You're more than welcome to call in. I will be glad to take that call. Behind me, this set behind me, including the fireplace, is a legit set. That is not a green screen. That's real stuff back there. I don't have anything I can throw back there. This is my book. See, we'll put it back there. See, that hit something? I think it did. So that's on the floor back there now. Now you can't see it. I threw it out of frame. See, I'm no good at this. But that is a real set. That's a real picture of that my son did of an Atari joystick when he was, I don't know, in elementary school. It was just awesome. I stuck it there. It's a real motherboard. It's a real cricket ball and a cricket bat. It's my real YouTube 100,000 subscriber silver plaque, which I'm thankful and appreciative from you. That's your plaque. Thank you. All that's real stuff. There's real cigars in the humidor. That's a real Apple Mac up there. So that's all real stuff. And it is a real I can't see it because I can't see it. That's a real fireplace. And I do use it in the winter. I'm in Florida, so we don't use it a lot. It's beautiful outside right now. But sometimes it does get cool, and I do like to use that fireplace. Usually don't have it on during the study group. This is a relatively small room that I do this in, and the fireplace tends to heat things up very, very quickly. So that's one of those scenarios where I try not to leave it on a lot. It does get things quite warm, though, to have this here. Questions in the chat room. Let's go to questions about topologies. So whenever you look at the Network Plus exam, there's a whole video that talks about network topologies, and it's a very broad scope of network topologies. It talks about bus. It talks about ring. It talks about meshed networks. It talks about star networks. But it doesn't talk about protocols or anything running over those networks. So the question is, are those layer 2? Are those layer 3? What are they? Do they function with layer 3? Are they required to be just layer 3 or layer 2? In that particular question, you're really just talking about architecture. You're really talking about the roads that you're building. What you put over the road is completely up to you. You could be running all protocols that only operate at layer 2. You could. It used to be that's what we used to do in networks. We didn't have a layer 3 function. Only with the inclusion of things like Banyan Vines, Novell NetWare, did we start to get some layer 3 protocols, and we were able to put routers on our network and expand it out. It used to be just we had one long wire down the middle of the room, one long bus, and we just connected everybody into that bus, and that was our network. It was this one wire in the middle of the room, literally a big cable, a big coax cable in the middle of the room. And then we came up with ways that we could separate it out because there was a real need. You just can't run the wire throughout the entire world and have everybody tap into that one wire. We had to have some way to break this network up, but still be able to talk to each other. And only at that point did we start creating layer 3 protocols to be able to route them and have that there. So the very broad view of star and ring and hybrid and all those things, who knows what's running across it. You can run anything over those networks, certainly layer 2, certainly layer 3, but none of them are specific to a particular OSI model. It simply depends on what you're running over it, and you get to decide that. These days, most everything is TCP/IP. It's a layer 3 type protocol that's being run over that with layer 7 applications on top of that. So one of those. Question in the chat room, do I have any plans for Linux Plus? I'd love to do more Linux. Obviously, if you're on my website right now, I have all different protocols, all different operating systems I use on my network. For example, you're watching the stream right now. The stream is being sent to you from a Windows 10 device that is in the other room. You're simply seeing the video feed from that right now. That's my live stream server. One server that all it does is handle the streaming, and it's running Windows 10. In front of me, Mac OS. In front of me, my mixer is actually an embedded Linux. I'm running iOS here, and if you're on my website, you're on Linux. a lot of Linux. There's a lot of different servers and a lot of different things happening there, and they're all running Linux. So I'd love to do more Linux. Part of the challenge with that is there's a brand new Linux certification from CompTIA. Now would be a great time to do that, but I'm not sold on it quite yet. I did some Linux videos in the past. The approach or the reception of those Linux videos was probably not what I was hoping for. Maybe that's changed now. And I think it would be a good one to do. I love using Linux. It's fun. So we should do more Linux. Maybe it's an entire course. Maybe it's just course notes. I don't know yet. So we'll figure that out and having those things there. And having those pieces. So folks in the chat room, others are saying, has the crackling audio been addressed? Yeah, there isn't any. I don't have any crackling audio. Unless somebody is telling me this entire time has been nothing but horrible crackling audio. Normally we see that in the chat room well ahead of time. What I'm sending to you, for the most part, as far as I know, has been very, very good audio. I spend a lot of time on the audio piece of this, by the way. For those of you wondering, this is a Heil PR40 end fed microphone. Some people sent me an email and saying you're talking into the wrong end. You're supposed to be talking into the side like this. No, this is an end fed microphone. You're talking to in fact, there's a little arrow. You can kind of see it. It says talk here. They're just assuming they know how smart I am. Talk into this side of it. So that's what I do. That's going back to effectively a digital mixer. This takes the analog, converts it to digital. It's a Linux embedded device that then can send that IP, or really it's probably not even IP. It's just a Mac level signal anywhere in here. Or we're dealing with multicast and multiple devices. So it's one of those situations where whatever happens inside is not important. The important part is it's able to manipulate that signal however I would like. Becomes useful to have that there. So it goes into their beautiful digital signal coming out of that, going directly to a single switcher. So that audio feeds into this very colorful switcher that's in front of me. That is the thing that switches the audio and video for this system. And then once that happens, it goes directly over digital coax for a very standardized that's how we do video, professional video sent over this coax connection via what's called SDI. And that SDI connection goes directly into my streamer, and then the streamer sends it out. So there's very few places in here where there's ever an analog signal. Very few opportunities to send a crackly signal out. So you'll find that's the case, that I get it into the mixer. Once it gets in that mixer, it's digital all the way through. There's SDI. Really, I guess it's analog from the mixer into my switcher. That is analog, but that's a very controlled cable connection. And then from there, everything else is digital until it hits YouTube. Probably past that. Until it hits your headphones, it's all digital. So that's an odd thing, isn't it? Will there be ICND2 course notes? I'd love to do some additional Cisco course notes as well. No plans right now, but I do have the functionality to do that. I would love to be able to do more Cisco. I just love the Cisco stuff. Networking is where I really cut my teeth with technology. I really got into the networking piece, really got into understanding protocols, and that's what eventually led me into security. So IT security was simply an adjunct or an extension of the networking that I had already learned. And I love the Cisco piece of it. In my career, interestingly enough, I didn't get a lot of time to use a lot of Cisco devices. Most of what I did in my professional career was prior to Cisco being extremely popular on the networking side. And I did a lot of what happened to be at the time Wellfleet, which eventually turned into Nortel. So a lot of those technologies are ones that are very similar. Obviously, networking is networking. Ethernet is Ethernet. Routing protocols are routing protocols. It doesn't matter what the technology is, which, by the way, is what Cisco runs into problems with right now. They're so worried about that aspect of it because once that functionality becomes commoditized, it could be anybody's router. It could be anybody's switch. And the manufacturers don't want us to run into that situation either when we're trying to figure out how do we break through those pieces of it, understand those. That's a challenge. What load balancer do I use? That's a good question. I don't know. The manufacturer load balancer is a cloud-based load balancer. I intentionally don't know the answer because it is provided to me by my provider, by my cloud-based hosting provider. So I don't know what load balancer exactly they are using. It is not a standalone device. It is a cloud-based device, and have those there. It's one where I get to swap it in and out, do different things with it, but I don't have to deal with the operating system front end side of it, thankfully. One of the advantages of running everything possibly in the cloud, and having that there. One of the things that I do is I do as much as I can dealing with the moving parts. I have someone else do it. And I think most entrepreneurs will tell you that that's a key part of this. You need to focus on what you're doing. So I want to focus completely on what I'm doing with making content. I want to focus on creating the content, making sure that I build it out to be something you can understand, focus on creating the live streams, focus on creating the on-demand videos, and focus on doing that. Someone else completely handles the management of my website. Well, I wouldn't say the management, but making sure it continues to run. I have a hosting provider that gives me more than just host. They are my IT team. So I make sure that that they are taken care of. I send them nice things. I talk nicely to them, and they make sure my website is running. But they also help me with questions I have about design, growth, technical details about running the server, how I should configure the load balancer. They will help me with all those things. So they handle that piece. If I run into a problem, I call them. They handle it. I have someone else handle the finance side of this. I have my own accountant. They handle that. Taxes, they handle that. I don't want to have to deal with that because that takes time away from creating content. I have someone else handle getting content to you. So if you order a physical book, that goes to a group of people I rely on to print the book on demand and ship it to you. They handle all of those logistics. I don't want to have to sit here all night and put books together. And in the meantime, you're wondering, where's all the videos? Why aren't you making more videos? Well, I got to put the books together and ship them out. That makes no sense either. So I have them do that, and they do a great job at it. I would not use them if they did not. If someone wasn't up to the standards I set for doing all of these things, I don't use them. I think your training experience should be something where you're getting the best possible materials available. So often, not just in this particular part of the IT or even technology in general, but so often in normal things you do in life, people try to give you things that are just good enough. I don't like things that are just good enough. I want the things that are the best that I could possibly get. And so whenever I create a book, I want it to be the best book you could possibly get for this content, all the way down to the type of paper that's used. That's the approach I take to everything that I do. So whenever I focus on making content for you, I'm really in a tunnel. I want to be able to make the content and get it to you and make sure that I'm focusing on that single thing. That helps, I think, not just me, but I think it makes a better product for you when you're ready to learn, when you're ready to do Q&A. I would think and hope the questions I create for you on these study groups are much better than questions you would get anywhere else because it's someone who is really in the middle of it. I write all of this. I don't rely on someone else to write it. I don't parse it out to somebody else to create the content. I think that's part of the value we provide is that I'm the one creating the content. I know if the content's good. If the content's really good, it came from me. If it's really bad, yeah, it came from me too. So there's one place to go to fix those things. Is it necessary to get A+ certification, then Network Plus, if someone doesn't have any knowledge of A+, but has pretty good networking experience? Well, one of the things from CompTIA, of course, is there are no formal prerequisites. So CompTIA does not require you have any type of prerequisite prior to taking the A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus. So you get to decide which one of those you take first. And a good example of this, by the way, is that I took them in this order. I took Security Plus first, then Network Plus, then A+. So I did it backwards in my scenario. But at the time, I was working for a security company, and it was useful for me to have a security-related certification. So why would I take A plus and Network plus? Of course I'm going to take Security plus. This happens all the time, even today. There are many people that come to my site and say, I need to get Security plus. I'm working for the federal government. I'm working for the Department of Defense. They want to hire me, but they won't hire me unless at a bare minimum I have Security plus. I don't have time to take A plus. I don't have time to take Network plus. And in fact, my impossible employer doesn't care if I have those. They only care if I have Security plus. That's where they start, which is a perfectly legitimate reason for starting with Security plus. None of these certifications require that you have knowledge from the others. There is a little bit of overlap between them. I think sometimes people will tell you that there's a lot of overlap between them. There is not a lot. There is some. If you have that Venn diagram, there's a little bit of overlap between those two circles. Did I do that right? Venn diagram, a little overlap between those two circles, but not a lot. You can see a little bit of a hole between those, but not a lot. So focus on what you need to learn. If your employer's saying, I need networking knowledge, should I start with A plus? Well, no, they're telling you need networking knowledge. If somebody says, I need to get a job with the Department of Defense, then you should probably start with Security plus. So that's going to be the decision you make. There's not more overlap than in long past now. It has been almost exactly the same type of overlap. And it's very little. Some people think there's a lot of overlap between Network plus and Security plus for some reason, and there's actually not a lot at all. Security plus is just so vast. Not a lot of overlap in either of those. A good question from John is asking, so here's the scenario. If I'm working towards a CCENT or a CCNA routing and switching, should I skip Network plus? And the answer is a qualified maybe. And here's what you have to figure out is first decide what you want to do. If you really are working towards the Cisco related certifications, you're working towards becoming a network administrator, you're working in an environment that has Cisco equipment, and they are expecting you to get Cisco certified, then perhaps it does make sense to skip the fundamentals of Network plus and jump right into the CCENT exam. The CCENT exam includes a lot of the content from Network plus and a lot more. They are in no way comparable certifications. They are extremely different than each other. I was, for some reason, reading on the internet that somebody said, yeah, the CCENT is effectively just as hard as the Network plus. That is completely wrong. The CCENT is significantly more difficult than the Network plus exam is. There's just tons of hands-on, and the detail you have to go into all of these different topics is much deeper on the CCENT than it is the Network plus. So you get to decide what you want to do. Now, if you skip the Network plus, you still have to learn all the things you would have learned on the Network plus, or almost all the things you would have learned on the Network plus when you take the CCENT. There's a lot. You still have to learn that content. So it may take you longer to get through the CCENT content without Network plus than it would have been if you had already taken the Network plus. But if that's the direction you're going anyway, that's not that big of a difference. So that's one where you have to decide what you want to do. If you're trying to get a job in a help desk, you're not going to be doing hands-on on a Cisco switch. You're not going to be doing router configurations. You're not going to be making determination of how you would design the spanning tree setup for your network. You're really just taking questions from the end users. Perhaps CCENT is overkill for you. Maybe you just want to focus on Network plus for the moment. And then if there's an opportunity later on to move into networking, maybe then you make the jump into CCNT and CCNA routing and switching. So that's one of those examples to have those things there. That is a common question. There's no single answer. The internet will tell you, don't take Network plus, just jump into CCENT. They're exactly the same thing. And they're just completely wrong. All you have to do is put the exam objectives next to each other and you would know this. That's not the case. I saw somebody did pop open on the phone lines. So we'll come back to the chat room in just a moment and answer a question about VLANs. But in the meantime, let's go to the 502 area code and we'll talk to the caller who's called in. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there? Have you decided this was a horrible idea and perhaps you should not have ever called? Yes, you did, and terminated the call. See how easy that was? That was the way to do it. Well played, sir. Well played. Let's ask a question or answer the question about the VLANs. Maybe I should ask the question, and you could go through here. You have I don't know what the firewall part of this is, but the question is: you have a computer on VLAN 30, you want it on VLAN 40, where the firewall allow that IP/MAC to be on VLAN 40 without changing the computer to be on the switch the actual VLAN 40 is on. That's a lot going on there. You got a lot of things happening in that question. Commonly, the firewall is not being used as a switch. Some firewalls can be used as a switch, but commonly, the vast majority of configurations for firewalls do not have their firewall configured as a switch, primarily because firewalls are expensive, and that's an expensive switch. Most of the time, you're switching on a switch and you're firewalling on a firewall. That's commonly how it's done. So the determination of what VLAN you are on is configured on the switch. We had the question about that in the first hour about somebody in accounting being stuck on the marketing VLAN because somebody didn't configure the switch properly. So they go into the switch, put them on the correct VLAN, and now they get the right IP addressing and send it on its way. By the time it gets to your firewall, it may be coming into your firewall in a trunk. It may be a separate connection from a separate IP address that is not trunked. That's a standard non-VLAN, non-trunked kind of connection. It just depends on the firewall configuration. There's not enough information there to know how the users are connecting to the firewall to be able to answer the question about what the firewall is able to do. Let's say you're using your firewall as a switch. Let's say you're burning money. You could put your firewall up. It's got 24 ports on this firewall. That's what many firewalls these days have, large number of ports on them. Let's say you got a 24-port firewall. You're plugging everybody directly into the firewall. You're configuring the firewall with switch interfaces, and you're firewalling between every single one of those interfaces. So there's some benefits to doing that. So if you are moving people from one VLAN to another, you're configuring the switch port on the firewall as to what interface someone will be on. So if you want to give somebody, generally a VLAN and an IP subnet are generally the same thing. They're connected to each other. So VLAN 1 is one IP subnet. VLAN 2 is a completely different IP subnet. VLAN 3 is a completely different IP subnet. So that's one of those situations where you would have different VLANs. If you move people from one VLAN to another, you're effectively moving them from one IP subnet to another. You can think of it that way as well. Technically, of course, VLANs are layer 2. IP addresses are layer 3. I understand that, but generally they are also connected to each other from a VLAN perspective. So there you go with those. And again, thanks for the clarification, which actually didn't help at all, which was that you have two switches, one in each room, one switch VLAN 30, one switch VLAN 40. Are you then plugging both of those switches into the router? In that particular case, then there's no VLANs considered at all. It's just IP addresses that are connecting in and configured on the firewall. There's no VLANs to consider once it gets to the firewall, VLANs are out of the scenario. VLANs are being used out there for the users. In fact, if it's separate switches, you're probably not putting people on different VLANs. This switch has VLAN. This switch is a completely separate VLAN. It's not talking to the other switch. They're not connected to each other. It's a separate world unto itself. There's not really separate VLANs you're doing there. If it's separate switches, it would not make sense to have one switch on VLAN 30 and another VLAN 40, except I guess you could refer to it that way. But from the user's perspective, it makes no difference. It's because they're not connected to each other. They could be the same VLAN on both switches. In fact, that's the default configuration, right? You pull a switch out of the box, everybody's on VLAN 1. And if the switches aren't connecting to each other, that doesn't matter. Everybody's on VLAN 1. Usually in an environment like enterprise, though, that's not usually the case. Usually there's a trunk. You got multiple VLANs. There are multiple VLANs on a single switch because you have multiple users connecting to that switch who are in different departments. It's a little more complex from a VLAN perspective. At that point, you're getting a little out of scope for Network Plus, but you're right in the scope for something like a CCENT because that's exactly where you are on configuring and planning those things out. Let's go back to phones real quick. Got 937 is here. Hello, caller. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name's Garrett Schumacher. I'm calling from Illinois, just outside Chicago.
Excellent. Thanks for calling, Garrett. What can we do for you?
Well, I just renewed all three of my certifications, A Plus, Network Plus, and Security
Wow,
Plus,
nice.
about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just looking for a job in the Chicago area. I didn't know in IT, I didn't know if there were good websites I could go to find jobs that zone in specifically on IT type jobs like security and networking and cybersecurity.
There are. I was just seeing a report that someone posted on Reddit in the CompTIA subreddit. I want to say it was, but it might not have been because I searched for so many crazy things on Reddit. But it talked about LinkedIn, I think, did a recent press release where LinkedIn said, we have more jobs posted on LinkedIn than any other job posting site out there, which I thought was impressive. There's a lot of that's going on. That's not to say the quality of job postings on LinkedIn was a better quality than job postings on some of these other sites, but I thought it interesting that they were bringing up that particular statistic. The place you would go are the common ones that you would find in the industry. It's the dice.com, the monster.com, the linkedin.com. That's where you would go to find some of those job postings. I would also say, since you're in that particular geography and you have people that are also, there's a lot of companies in your particular part of the world that are doing IT, you'd be in a good place to meet some of these people at some local user groups. So if you're in the Microsoft world, go to a Microsoft user group. If you're into networking, go to your Cisco user group. Find out where those user groups are going to be in your area. If you're doing virtualization, go to VMware. And perhaps even if you're not into those particular technologies, it still might be a good idea to go to those user group meetings. The people who are there are generally the ones who are involved in the hiring process for those particular jobs. And even if they aren't, you can ask them questions about what their particular company is hiring in your area. And that's what those meetings are all about. That's one of the reasons that those people are at the meeting, is to find out not just what's happening with Microsoft's latest technologies, but to find out what those people are doing with those technologies in other places. Because you'll find in technology, about every 3 years, people are hopping on to a different job in a different company. So that's one of the things people like to do, is keep a good network of people. Not network with computers, but people network together. And LinkedIn's a really good place to do that. And when you meet people, ask to join their LinkedIn group or have them join yours. Keep in touch. Give them your resume. They can pass it on to HR. Those are great networking opportunities, and very often you'll find that there are some jobs there. In the chat room, somebody said, I can't find any Chicago user group meetings, which I know for a fact that's not true, because I know there's some Chicago user group meetings for Microsoft and Cisco, and I know Palo Alto Networks, my previous employer, had user group meetings in the Chicago area. There are definitely some there. So go hunt those out. There's got to be some in the area, maybe not in Chicago proper, but outside that particular area. There's, of course, so many different areas of that particular part of the world. You may be able to find one without having to go very far. And if there isn't one, by the way, what a great opportunity to start one. It only takes one person to say, let's do a Microsoft user group meeting, put it on, what is the meetup.com, put it on that meetup site, and have people show up, and you can talk Microsoft and find out more about that. That's a great way to do it too. That's some of the suggestions I would have. Finding a job in the industry, that first job, is so challenging. And one of the best things you can do is to find the people who are there and get to know them. I mentioned this in other study groups that I had about 15 different positions in this industry through my career. Some of those positions were within the same company. Some of them were going to a different company and working there. In every single one of those cases, except one, I knew somebody who already worked at that company. So in fact, some of those cases, I knew somebody who worked in a different department that had nothing to do with IT, and I was able to get in the door. And because I knew that person, there was a connection there. And all people need to know is that, oh, you know somebody who works here. All right, they vouch for you. That's good enough for us. We'll check that one off the list. Now let's see what you know about ARP. You know, we went down that road. You still have to be knowledgeable. It isn't only who you know. It's a little bit of what you know, but it sure helps if you have both of those.
Right. That's just about me branching out. So, I mean, I used to run a train in Chicago because I lived west of the city, and there was a person I rode the train with at night, and he was involved in that industry. So, and I started talking to him, but he's not a member of any user groups or anything like that. I mean, would CompTIA have its own user group? Do you know?
In that,
And
obviously, that's where CompTIA is headquartered. So it's possible they would do some of those. I know CompTIA was talking about doing a user group. It was more of a virtual user group on their website. I don't know what came of that, and if they really started rolling it out. But practically every geography has one for Microsoft. Practically every geography has one for Cisco. And as I mentioned, we were doing some with Palo Alto Networks in that geography. So I know there are some there. There are also, for those of you that maybe can't attend user group meetings or it doesn't make sense for you, there are also regional trade shows in IT. I wish I could remember the names of some of these offhand, but they're different depending on where you are in the country, where there will be a day set up at a hotel where all of these vendors, Microsoft and Palo Alto Networks, VMware, Cisco, they all show up. They talk about what they're doing, plus a lot of the local companies are there, and it's all IT people, and they usually do talks and lectures as well. That's a great place to meet people, is at some of those regional trade shows. You don't have to go to Vegas. You don't have to go to New York. You don't have to go to San Francisco. You can probably stay right in your area and meet some of these IT professionals. And it's not necessarily in a user group session, and it's something that only happens maybe once or twice a year. But any opportunity is better than none.
right, and I'm a military veteran on top of it, so I think the path should be pretty easy. And I have a master's in IT, and
Nice.
so yeah, I'm
At this point, it's all about getting in
plus
front of
three
people
other
then.
degrees.
And I think
Yeah.
that's your biggest step. In fact, people kind of discount that. They don't think of spending enough time getting FaceTime in front of people and doing that. It's an important part of not just getting your first job, but getting every job after that.
Exactly. But yeah, I don't mind going into Chicago because I live west of the city. Was doing that for about 5 years. So
That's a good place to go.
so-
And for those of you in that particular area, or if you have any ideas, you're more than welcome to send me ideas of what you would find in that area, user group meeting wise. I'll be glad to retweet that. So that might be a good place to just keep monitoring. And if anything comes my way, I'll send it out.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks. I appreciate the call, Garrett. Best of luck.
Yes, thanks.
That's one of the biggest challenges is finding people. For those of us that have kind of been in the industry a while, we can put out feelers. We have people on our LinkedIn, people we've worked with in the past. We kind of keep track of what they're doing, at least at a tertiary level. And then occasionally we'll touch base and say, I have somebody who's looking to do this, or I'm looking to do this, and they can give me some suggestions and help out. We can sort of help each other out that way. But you also run into these cases where if you're just out of college or you're in the process of getting a degree, you may not know anybody in the industry. So that's where the user groups can really jumpstart that process. You walk into a room, there's 30 people from 15 different companies, 20 different companies. That's a great opportunity. And you should have your process, the greeting all ready to go. Hey, how are you? It's my first time here. This is great. Who are you? Where do you work? What are you doing? I have a question maybe you can help me with. I'm working on my degree, or I just got my degree. I'm looking to get into a help desk position, working in IT. What does your company look for in somebody working in the help desk? Well, let me in. People love to answer that question. Let me answer that for you, and then they'll give you the answer. So if people sometimes will say, what should I study? What should I get? What certification will help me the most to get that IT position, to get that help desk position? And I always turn around and say, I don't know. What are they looking for? Some employers love to have you certified. Some employers do not want you certified. Some employers don't care. So the real question is, what do people in your area look for? So that's one that's another one of those that's useful to have. Make sure you know. On Reddit, since I spoke to Reddit, some folks in the chat room were talking about a Network Plus Reddit. I'm not aware of a Network Plus Reddit, but there is a CompTIA Reddit subreddit. Go to reddit.com/r/CompTIA. I'm in there too. We're always talking back and forth. They also have a Discord You can talk on their Discord about those things. Plenty of places to go. People always willing to help out on the Reddit to have those things happening. And of course, there's always a chat on my website at the bottom, 24/7. There's sometimes usually people there as well to have those there. Let's go back to the phone lines real quick to 602. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Mohammed. I'm calling from Mesa, Arizona.
Welcome, Mohammed. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
My question is, what's the best way to keep my A plus and Net plus updated without retaking the exam?
And this is something that nobody wants to take the exam again. I'm with you. I am on your side. Obviously, A plus is 2 exams. So if you had to update your certifications by taking exams, that would be a tremendous amount of work to make that happen. Now, CompTIA knows you've already done that. You already spent all the time studying. You already learned everything you need to learn to take the exam. You took the exams, you passed the exams, and you got the certification. So they don't expect that you would need to take the exams again. All you need to do is stay up to date with the latest technologies in your particular area of expertise. CompTIA has they have a hierarchy for these exams. So if let's say you have an A plus, a Network plus, and a Security plus certification, you have all 3 of those. CompTIA doesn't expect that you're going to individually update and keep each one of those renewed. What they expect is that you'll renew the highest level exam. So in the case of those 3, and CompTIA has a list of these on their website, of those 3, Network plus is the highest level exam. As long as you renew, or Security plus is the highest level exam, as long as you renew Security plus, the other 2, Network plus and A plus, automatically get renewed. So already you can narrow your focus to just the highest level exam that you have. In your case, it sounded like you have A plus and Network plus. So the only one you would have to keep renewed is Network plus, and it would automatically renew A plus. Now there are different ways to renew. Some of these involve taking a renewal exam, which is not the full-blown Network Plus. It's just an updated version of the Network Plus that's much smaller, more focused on things that have only changed between the exam versions, and usually has fewer number of questions. So it's not the same as going into an actual Network Plus. But they do have kind of an update exam that you can take if you wanted to do that. But again, some people don't like to take exams, and they prefer not doing that. CompTIA, of course, accepts continuing education credits. These units are that you can accumulate by doing different things, by attending a webinar, by creating a blog entry, by attending a training class, by going to an industry trade show. There's many different tasks that you can complete. And if you complete enough of those tasks, you have enough credits that you can then turn in to renew your certification for another 3 years. That's another way to do it. Some people will take what CompTIA calls the Cert Master CE, which is an online training program that takes what CompTIA says 4 to 6 hours. You take it in this training program, this computer-aided training online. You go through it and answer questions. You get all those questions right. You spend 4 to 6 hours doing it, and you finish, and now you've renewed your certification for 3 years. That's a very easy way to do it. Because it only involves you doing that. It's called Cert Master CE. Cert Master is a brand name for a lot of different programs. Cert Master Learning, Cert Master CE, Cert Master. There's 3 or 4 different programs they have. This one is specifically Cert Master CE for the continuing education. That might be an easy way to do it. I summarized all of these in a video I stuck on YouTube recently, which is how to renew your CompTIA certification in just a few hours. So if you Google that, if you search for that one on the YouTube, how to renew your CompTIA certification in just a few hours, I go through each one of those scenarios, and I give you advantages and disadvantages of each one of those, and how long it would take for that to happen. There was somebody who came to my website and said, I've got all 3 of these, and they all, I've only got 3 days, and they all expire, and I will lose all 3 of them unless I renew. What should I do? Well, asking him to study for a certification exam in 3 days, that's a lot. And he didn't have time to do it because he also worked during the day. So I said, well, have you tried CertMaster CE? And he had no idea it even existed. He went out to the website. He purchased it. He took it. He said it only took him 3 hours. He got through it in 3 hours. And now, instantly, 3 years of renewals are available for all 3 of his certifications, and he lost nothing. So that may be a good way to go as well. But you have options, and that's always good to have some options there.
Thank you very much. That's all I need.
I appreciate it. Thanks
you.
for calling. I think that's one of the best things CompTIA has done is to get that. So very nice to have that CEU option. Now there are cost differences between them. There's timing differences between them. There's so many differences between how you renew your certification. So don't be caught by that. Just decide which one fits best for you, and then you can follow that path and being able to do that. Question somebody asked in the chat room about CEUs. You haven't taken your Network Plus exam, but you've been gaining the CEU credit by watching my videos. Are you able to use in this particular case, it would be my study group videos because I don't provide CEUs for watching my course videos. Are you able to use those previously earned credits after you receive your exam? According to CompTIA, no. Nope, you've got to get your exam certification first. You've got to pass the exam, earn the certification, and only then can you accumulate CEUs. Sorry, that's just the way they do it. I guess that makes sense, right? You can't earn a CEU for something you don't have yet. I guess that makes sense from what they're doing. However, you can send your request in to me to get the CEU whenever you would like. So I think you should do it after you earn your exam. I'm going on record as saying that, but I have no idea when you took your exam. So that's up to you. What places can you get CEUs? Well, I'm so glad you asked. On the CompTIA website, if I can type properly to go out to CompTIA, there is an entire document they have on all of the different things you can do to earn continuing education units. It's a lot. Let me see if I can find this on the site. Let's put my big head in the picture. There we go. And they've got all these different things. Earning a non-CompTIA IT industry certification, complete training in higher education, participate in IT industry activities, publish a relevant article, blog post, or book, gain related work experience. All of these are possible things you can do to earn CEUs. So you can earn non-CompTIA IT industry certifications by clicking on that. They will tell you all of the things you can earn. They're the ones for the CompTIA. They also have non-CompTIA you can do. Let's go back one page. Complete training in higher education. They'll give you a big list of those on the website of things you can do and how much. For example, attending a live webinar, you can watch 4 of my live webinars and earn 4 CEUs towards your A+ certification renewal, 6 CEUs for Network Plus, 10 for Security Plus, and then so on. So it's this huge matrix of things that you have to keep track of for these CEUs. You become an expert in collecting CEUs during your process of renewing your certification, for better or worse. That's what it is. And there is an annual fee required to collect the CEUs and submit them to CompTIA. There are other ways to renew your certification that don't require the annual maintenance fee. So these are the things I break out in that video that I created, which was how to renew your certification in just a few hours, where some of them cost different amounts. Some of them you have annual fees, some of them you don't. It just depends to be able to do that. So hopefully that's given you some ideas of some of the things that you can use for renewal. And you should think about it. You spend all this time working on the certification, working towards earning that CEU, earning the certification, earning the actual certificate. It would be nice to keep that. And I realize at some point in your career, you will get to a point where I probably don't need to keep that A+ anymore. And that would be great. I hope that I am hoping for all of you that happens, that you're now at a point where let's focus on the higher level certifications and we can finally let the lower level certifications go on by the wayside. That's a normal part of IT. I don't think anybody keeps all their certifications for their entire lifetime. It's just not practical for most people. and it's not very useful for your career goals. Certification is one of the things that you use to help move your career along. That's the primary use of a certification. Of course, certifications can also be used for your own personal understanding of technology, but for the most part, I think most of us are using that to show people that we know what we're doing. So, of course, you'll start with A+. Eventually, you'll get Cisco, perhaps, or you'll get VMware or Microsoft. Then you'll move into higher levels of those. If you have a Cisco CCIE, then you're probably spending all of your days architecting, designing, implementing, troubleshooting, maintaining Cisco networks. A+ is not really involved in that particular world. You're way past that. So once you get to that point, it's not going to be one of those cases where you're going to run into keeping your A+ anymore. That just makes sense, I think. And that's a good thing if you're at that point. Congratulations to you. From the chat room, am I partnering with other training organizations that has my material tied to QR codes? Not specifically. I suspect you're referring back to the GTS Learning books used to have a QR code in their book. And if you click that QR code, it would take you to YouTube and open up my video on the topic they were talking about in their book, which was great. And that was really something that was provided to GTS Learning. First, I loved working with GTS Learning. They were great people. And so I enjoyed that very much. And it was a great combo because they could do that for free. There was nothing, it was really just them having the capability to do it and me working with them to make sure those videos would be available for them. But I wanted my videos to be available to everybody. Technically speaking, anyone could do that. The videos are on YouTube. As long as you comply with YouTube's terms of service, you would be able to do that. And I generally speaking, would not have any argument with that. But of course, if you're doing that and putting in a book, you want to be sure that I'm not going to pull them off of YouTube and then your book's worthless. That's not what you want to have happen either. So it was nice to work with them. And we had a nice arrangement to have that happen. And it worked out perfect. The GTS Learning, though, about this time, just before this time last year, it's been over a year now, they were acquired by CompTIA. So now GTS Learning became CompTIA, and GTS Learning effectively ceased to exist. And at that point, I wasn't working with anybody at GTS Learning because they didn't exist anymore. So I have not been working with them to do that. They may still do that. I don't know. There are still people at CompTIA, I believe, who are former GTS Learning employees, and they were writing some of the content. So they may still be doing it, which is great if they are. I've not spoken with them about it, though. So maybe they're just hoping I keep that stuff out there and don't mess anything up with those. Or maybe they're not anymore, which I guess is fine, too. There are people at CompTIA I keep in touch with. There are people I talk to at CompTIA. Although I'm not a CompTIA partner, there are parts of our training materials they do use with some of their materials, which is great. I work with them, and they're great people to work with, and it's worked out great so far. But I don't have an ongoing relationship with them with any of those things. So it's one of those situations where I just don't run into that very much, to have all those and I don't know of anybody else using that, a QR code to do that. It was kind of a nice situation, wasn't it? You could read through the book. They had their diagrams. They had their descriptions. They would go through the details of it, and then you could click that QR code to actually watch a video that had to do with the topic they were just talking about. It was kind of nice. I agree. It was nice to get the two perspectives. Reading from a book and watching a video, I think, are two important ways to learn. I think you should use both of them. Very often on my website, people will say, I want to just watch videos and take the exam. Could I just watch your videos and do that? Well, I did design my videos with every topic from the exam objectives in them. But you've probably noticed this, that when you watch a video, you're learning in one way. And then when you read it in a book, it's a different way of learning. You're learning the content differently. I think it fires the synapses different. I think it is a different perspective on how you're learning the content, which is why I also say you need to do Q&A. I think that's a great way to learn. You need to do hands-on, a completely different way to learn, and all of them teach you in a different way. So unless you're using all of those together, you're not really getting the entire training picture you should be getting. I think at a bare minimum, you should be reading a book and watching videos, and then adding on the Q&A and the hands-on. For example, if I was to take the content of a book and create a video on that content, my video series would probably be 10 times longer in length, because books can cram so much information into such a small place and so quickly that you just can't do that in a video. Videos teach in a different way. And when I write in my content, when I'm writing my content, I'm writing it for video. I'm writing it to give you this very particular perspective of the information that is different than a book. I'm not trying to duplicate a book, and I'm not trying to be your exclusive provider of content. I'm trying to give you the best possible video training based on the medium. And it's hard for me to explain that is different, and that it's hard for me to exactly explain how I do that. I guess there's a little bit of secret sauce there as well. But it's not the same. I'm not taking stuff I would have written in a book and giving it to you in a video form. I'm doing a video training that is very specific to someone watching a video. So that's what I'm hoping to provide anyway. That's my philosophy in my training courses. And that's why I tell people, you need a good book. And they always say, can I use your videos? I go, people have. I'm not sure why they've done that. And why would you? Books are, relatively speaking, books are inexpensive. In some cases, go to the library. They're free. In some cases, go to the library and download a PDF of it. Free. So take advantage of those resources available to you and get your hands on some of those books, because that's a great way to learn. Use it in conjunction with a video course, mine or anybody else's. You'll be taught things in a different way there as well. So that's my plans. Any plans for Linux Plus? Now that the exam is being updated, you must have come in late. I'd love to. Linux, I like Linux. I've done some Linux videos in the past. We ran into some challenges with how they were received. The Linux community is a unique community that has unique requirements, and I'm not sure I was the right fit then for what they wanted, but I might give it another try. We'll see. We'll see if that works out. I don't know yet. So the answer is I don't know, as qualified as that is. Right now I'm finishing up my A+ series, and at that point I could take a step back and say, what's next? And then go that direction. Sometimes it's until the very last minute. Sometimes I think I should go one direction, I go another based on just a gut feel. Sometimes that's the way it goes. So sometimes I'm never quite sure until it actually happens. And if it does, then you'll know when it happens. But right now, I don't have any specific plans for Linux Plus. That could change as soon as I finish this this live stream. All of that can be completely different for those. And there's distribution. Linux is a very broad set of topics. There are distributions that do things in different ways. Traditionally, the Linux Plus certification has looked at two major different distributions and gone those two different ways, so that you could learn, this one you need to do yum, and this one you need to do apt-get or an apt. So it's kind of focused on both of those and teaching you both of those. But of course, Linux has its own varied myriad of different ways to do things, which adds some complexity to the certification piece. But fortunately, most of the exam objectives are the core Linux. The ls command is the ls command. So you don't go much further out of scope for listing. Oh, but you could use this with it. Yes, I know, but ls is ls, and we're going to focus on that. So it just depends. I've seen the exam objectives are pretty good. There's different ways that Linux boots in different distributions. There's different files that are used. There's different methods that are used to start the services. There's all kinds of differences. So I don't mind getting into that. I'd love to show people those things. I think they're interesting, and I think they can help people, and I think they would help people with their career by knowing that content. But there's a lot of different variables that go into that for me deciding what do I do next and what do I create for you. And I'm just not locked in yet. I'm not 100. I thought I knew what I was going to be doing after I finished my A+ videos. No, I don't know yet. I go back and forth all the time. There's just constant thoughts in my brain of what directions to go. Oh, yes. Let's not even talk about System D and the value or non-value of that. This is the problem, of course, with Linux, is that's a very passionate user community. And if you talk about one topic, it quickly devolves into why it's bad and you should hate it, or why it's good and you should love it. And nobody's going to actually change their mind. All we do is complain about the other one. And it just got to be so toxic in some case. Not toxic, but so negative or contrary. It wasn't even negative. It was just contrary. We love to do that in technology and talk about advantages and disadvantages, except I'm trying to do a training course. And we can't quite get there with those pieces. We're too busy being contrary sometimes. That's just the nature of the internet, I think. And I think I've learned that over time, how to handle those things better as well. So maybe we can figure out a good way to work around some of that. And the answer, by the way, is to turn off comments. That's how you do that. That's my little tip. I haven't done that yet. All my videos still have the comments turned on for better or worse. We'll see how that goes. With Linux, I don't know if I'd be able to do that or not. We'll have to think if that would work or not. But those are just some of the things I have to think through when I'm trying to figure out what to do next. So that gives you some idea. Well, I have plenty more to do here. I'm editing video this afternoon. I'm shooting more video tomorrow. There's always something to have happen around here. There's always something going on. We've got a Security Plus study group next week. Same time, same place. So come back on Wednesday at noon Eastern, and the Security Plus study group will take place. I haven't even written the content yet, so I've got to work on that as well and get those questions ready for you, because I love doing the security stuff, and I want to be sure those are good questions for you too. There's plenty that we're going to be doing here over the next month. I know summer's coming up. A lot of you are doing plenty of things over the summer, so we're going to keep doing things as well. We'll have live streams throughout the summer months, and of course, we'll be doing plenty once the fall season starts up. Everybody gets back to school, wants to get more certifications done. You're coming up on the holidays. There's plenty of good study time. We'll have plenty of stuff for you there as well. Thanks for being here with this one. Thanks for joining us in that first hour of Q&A and joining me in the chat room and the phone calls for the after show. We couldn't do it without you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us on the Network Plus Study Group.